Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine McGew. I think most of you know that by now. I'm semi-retired, obviously, not completely retired from working at D-Wave, and delighted to be here. My topic today, this is the latest news from benchmarking, is where to look for quantum advantage in your benchmarking data. It's easier if you find it. And let me just sort of clarify what I mean. These words are tossed around quite a bit, and everybody means something different. Quantum supremacy is, the demonstration that your quantum computer can do a task that would take a zillion years and all the energy on the planets, and some extreme kind of power and speed up is demonstrated. And that's opposed to quantum utility, to my mind, and this is more or less how D-Wave uses these terms, which is really about a business customer doing a cost-benefit analysis and realizing that this quantum approach is going to save them money or improve, increase income or something. It's very domain-specific and dependent, or domain-dependent. And somewhere in between the quantum supremacy and quantum utility is where I would put quantum advantage. It's a demonstration, there's a paper written about it, that the quantum processor does a task better than the best reasonable alternatives under reasonably realistic test conditions. I will say that the quantum supremacy result that you've all heard about does count as quantum advantage in the sense that the problem that was solved existed before D-Wave tried to solve it, and there's been a huge upsurge of physics papers that followed that. So just to give you an idea that it really is practical for somebody out there. So I want to talk about quantum advantage today. And basically in optimization research, there's this idea, it's not so much about winning a race, but about characterizing the performance landscape. You've got this big set of possible optimization problems and possible use cases and scenarios under which you might use it, and you're trying to find some boundaries when would you want to use this kind of a solver as opposed to that kind of a solver. So today I'm really talking about trying to find the places where you might expect that the quantum hardware alone, only talking about the hardware, might be actually useful to you. And I'm actually going to switch over here because I can see better, I think. Pardon me. And as it turns out, I did this, I spent a year, really over a year, doing a literature review. I found every paper I could in the literature that talked about empirical performance of quantum annealing processors. I stopped looking early in 2025 and started writing. And there's a paper I wrote. It has been accepted. I just have to finish the revisions, and it should be published later this year. But it's about characterizing performance of annealing quantum processors. And usually we think about that as thinking about, okay, which kind of inputs are a good match for which kind of solvers and which kind of use cases, which is maybe you have a time limit or you need samples of solutions rather than one optimal solution. And really from the high level, if you look at a decade's worth of literature, it's all over the place. There are papers saying, nope, doesn't work. There are papers saying, this is fabulous, and there's everything in between. So my goal was to try to find some order to all these conflicting papers. And as it turns out, surprisingly, you can find some order. It turns out that there's really only a small, it mostly depends on what kind of experimental design you came up with, how you chose to study the performance and what's important to the researcher designing the study. And so there are only these 5 design features that you can, if you know what the design features were used, you can actually predict what kind of outcome is going to come out of the study. So So to go over them quickly, analysis type is the, either you have two choices. You either want to do a scaling analysis, which means you put n on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis, and you say, how good is it? And somebody has fit a regression line, and they say, well, here's how it scales. And that's opposed to a runtime comparison, where if people say, how fast is it? And you say it took 20 milliseconds as opposed to 200 milliseconds. It's more like a stopwatch comparison. It matters whether you choose an exact metric. You want to know how often, what's the probability of finding an optimal solution, or an approximation metric, which would be something to do with how close is it to optimal in terms of the objective function value. It matters whether you measure anneal time, which is just the pure quantum part of the computation. People do that when they're more interested in how the algorithm behaves and comparing algorithms to algorithms. Or whether you're measuring access time, which also includes programming time and readout time after the anneal. And people look at that when they're more interested in comparing hardware to hardware, platforms to platforms. And so, you have a choice. Turns out it makes a difference whether you're using an earlier chimera-based graph topology or more recent Pegasus topology that's on the Advantage systems. I put Zephyr here, but in fact, Zephyr wasn't available when all of these papers were written, so none of the benchmarking literature that I'm talking about refers to Zephyr. And for that matter, in terms of anneal times, all of this work was published before fast anneals were made available. And so it doesn't have anything to do with fast anneals either. And quite possibly, we're just going to have to start over again once the papers start rolling in with these new products, new ideas. And so the last thing is the problem domain in which you do your comparison. You can compare a classical solver and a quantum solver, both running the same input, which is the physical input that's on the physical hardware, or you can imagine letting the classical solver solve a logical problem. You minor embed it onto the physical machine. You let the quantum solver solve the physical problem, then you map it back to the logical domain, and you're comparing it in the logical domain. And that changes, it changes things because based on that decision. So these choices reflect the benchmark test designer's thoughts about what's important to measure, and it often reflects your assumptions about what kind of use case it's going to, you're trying to capture in terms of reality. And also, it can determine whether or not you find quantum advantage in your data. Specifically, all of those 2 to the 5 different possibilities, there's correlations, and it really boils down to just 4 kinds of benchmark studies out there based upon certain combinations of these test design features. You can do a scaling study. There, parentheses means usually, which is like 9 out of 10 cases. They're usually done in an exact metric. They measure anneal times. Most, all but 2 of them are done on a chimera hardware. Excuse me. And most of the time it's done at a physical, in the physical problem domain. And you look at this body of tests, of work, and the answer is just always no. All but 1 comes up, no, it doesn't work. But on the other hand, if you do a runtime comparison, and it doesn't matter if you use exact or approximate metrics, but if you're measuring anneal time, it could be either of the hardware generations. It doesn't matter about the inputs either. The answer is nearly always yes, like 8 times out of 10-ish is where that is. But then if you measure access time, it matters whether you're running it on a chimera-based processor or whether you're running it on a Pegasus-based processor. You get pretty mixed results in the sense that some of them, when you're answering this question at the top, do annealing QPUs routinely show advantage in these tests? That's where the yeses and nos are coming. You get mixed results on the chimera, on the body of literature studying chimera, sometimes it's just a no answer, sometimes it's a yes answer from the paper, and sometimes you're actually seeing mixed results in the results they report. But in the Pegasus architecture, you can actually see a division according to whether it's physical or logical problem domain. So what I want to talk about today is briefly explain or try to understand why this should be the case, that these different categories of benchmark tests are showing consensus within each category, or else consensus that is not clear. And so it all turns out to be one picture's worth 1,000 words. This is just a diagram. I drew this. It's not real data. But it explains what's going on. So imagine this is a hypothetical physical input. It can be chimera or advantage. It's got 1,000 variables, 1,000 qubits. And what we're normally used to seeing in optimization work is a trade-off between the quality of the solution. It doesn't really matter. I just picked approximation ratio, but lower is better, and computation time. And this is hypothetical data, but the numbers you're seeing in the order of magnitudes are reflective of what you really see in the literature on this kind of a problem. And so there's this trade-off. You've got up at the top, you've got average solutions. That's if you just picked a random solution, it would have some average energy, and it's going to be on average up there. And then down at the bottom is the dotted line where the optimal solutions are. And in classical computing, it's accepted that if there's a trade-off between computational work and quality of solution. And if you spend more work, that means more time, but you're going to get better solutions for your trouble. And you can see the greedy algorithm, it starts with a random solution, tries to improve it, and when it gets to a local minimum, stops, prints it out, tries another one, improve it, stop. And so it's very, very quick to roll down to a local minimum, but it keeps repeating that if you're giving it a long time. And so that's why you see a cloud of points next to the greedy is bang, 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 they're coming out. And then you have a solver like simulated annealing, which has a parameter that the user can set about how much work it's supposed to do. And if you set that to a low value, don't do much work, you're going to get a less good solution. If you set it to a high value, this dotted line is sort of hypothetically how it might improve with extra work. And then we have exact solvers, and they're not really meant to be efficient. They're meant, if you give them enough time, they will guarantee to find the optimal solution. They generally take longer, but on the other hand, it's optimal. So these points here create what's called a Pareto frontier, and at each point there's a box sort of up in the upper right of it where this solver is optimal with respect to anything that would be in the shaded region above it. And we never, in optimization, expect to see one perfect, one best overall solver. You have a collection of optimal solvers, each optimal within its certain range. So where does quantum live? Well, I went back to all of those papers and found everything that was looking at physical inputs around n equal 1,000. And these boxes, the orange box is the space of all the solutions I found when measuring anneal time, and the blue box is the space of all the solution qualities I found when measuring access time. And you can see that anneal time, if you put a point anywhere in there, it's going to dominate. It's going to be the optimal, the best solution, Pareto optimal for most of this range. And that access time is, because it's got that 30 millisecond lower bound on programming time, you have to take the same points and shift them right. And you can see there's this crossover. And sometimes you win, that's why you get mixed results. It's quite a close call, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And the quantum advantage, you're going to see it in the cases where the access time dominates because it's a little bit better. And that's why you get mixed results with access time. But as problems get larger, what will happen is all of the classical solvers, those points will shift to the right because they're solving bigger inputs and they're searching a larger space. It takes them more time to get from average down to optimal. The quantum solver, in 10 years of benchmarking work, nobody has really ever bothered to change anneal time or change the number of reads to account for input size. And so the quantum times aren't going to change. They're just going to stay where they are. But on bigger problems, the distance, the vertical distance between average and optimal is going to increase. And so what happens if inputs get bigger is the classical solvers move to the right and the quantum solver moves down to the south. And you see that the Pareto region gets bigger. And that explains why on the very largest problems, which are the physical problems on Pegasus, you actually start seeing yeses again. So that's what I just said. Here's some data that you can see in papers from the literature that show exactly this behavior going on. And so the takeaway is, if you're going to do benchmarking performance evaluation, think about not winners or losers, but trying to find those boundaries of what works and what doesn't work. And right now, we can see that if you're going to be trying to solve logical problems, measuring access time, which is arguably the most realistic way to measure it, then you need to look at inputs that are larger than, close to 1,000 variables or 800 variables. And you need to look at runtimes that are below a second. You need to look at runtimes in the tens of milliseconds range in order to find it. All right, I'm done.